Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katrina and this is Katrina Reads. I want to have a book talk about the book The Good House by Tananarive. But I want to do it in a weird way, kind of, where I compare and contrast it between Stephen King, but to fend off any kind of weird way of kind of being accused of being trite with my comparison or my review. I want to first compare another book of Tananarive's called My Soul to Keep, and it has the same coldness that I think Stephen King books have that The Good House does not have. And so that's my compare and contrast between those two books. So I just don't want it to be like, oh, I'm just saying The Good House is Stephen King but black. I'm not distilling it down to that at all. And so I want to put that out there first, and then I want to do the compare and contrast in a way to describe my enjoyment of The Good House, why I enjoyed it, and my explanation of why it did feel so much like a Stephen King book, but wrapped in chocolate or warm, fudgy caramelness poured over it. So I do just want to use Stephen King to compare it to, because I kept thinking that the whole time I was reading it, like, wow, this sounds like Stephen King, but there's something else. And I think I figured it out after thinking about it for a couple days. My Soul to Keep is a book about Jessica, David, and Kiara, a family who, at the middle of it, David, who is an immortal, he 400 years ago drank blood and went through a rite with this group of people in Ethiopia, and they became immortals. And there is an unspoken rule that they want the people to stay. They want the immortals to stay in this little conclave in Ethiopia. But David becomes restless and he wants to see the world. He's bored with their quiet learning that the rest of them do in Ethiopia. And he goes all around the world, learns different languages, experiences different things. And what we see him do specifically is we see him a little bit in Ethiopia. We see him as a jazz player in Chicago, and then we see him present day in Florida. He's teaching, and Jessica, a young journalist student, takes one of his classes and they fall in love. Then they get married. Fast forward, she has a job in a journalist job. She wanted a bigger job, but she stays in Miami because of David, and she has a child. Everyone says that he's the perfect husband. It says it in the synopsis. It says it in the book. Her friends think it. One of the interesting things that I found about this book was that there's a lot of parallels between emotional abuse and what David does. Now, obviously, this book takes it to the extreme, because to keep his secret of being immortal, he has to start killing a lot of people who are around Jessica. Jessica takes on this story, and it's a story about deaths and lack of care in old folks' homes, and a murder that David does triggers her connection to the story. And so other people who are starting to get close to this story and find out his secret strangely, die around him. The story is cold, even though a black woman is writing it, because I think it necessarily has to be. An immortal person has to be cold. He can't have a connection to people. And that was the wisdom of the group, the initial group that he was with, because if you start making connections with people, they're going to find out necessarily. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt that person. You're going to necessarily be leaving these untied, strings left all around, because you'll have old children that will see you and think, wait a minute, Dad, how do you look the same age and I'm an old woman? things like that. And so he has to remain separated from people. And because he decides to selfishly, or just the human that's left in him, connect with Jessica, then he still has to keep himself separate. He has to lie. He has to kill people. And that is, that's the coldness in the story. Also, there's this sense of emotional abuse, and or it's like a parallel of this guy who, he seems like the perfect husband because he spends all of this time with his family. He wants to spend all this time with his family. He becomes a stay-at-home dad. Jessica, you know, he doesn't want Jessica to spend so much time with her friends because he wants to spend more and more time with her. He keeps asking for her to go away with them because the immortal conclave is coming after him. And so he wants to get away. But at the same time, like even before that, there was a lot of power imbalances. You know, he liked her because she was an innocent, you know, young student. He was forget the fact that he was immortal. Let's just think about the fact that he was her teacher. She was young. He liked her because she was innocent. She was an ingenue. He, then when they got married, he, you know, really pushed away her family. He pushed away her friends, and he did it in sneaky ways. He didn't want her to work as much. She was much more, she was frustrated in her job because she wanted to go further. She wanted to go higher, but he held her back. And that's a parallel for emotional abuse, I believe, because, you know, people can look like the perfect husband because he looks so dedicated to the family, and, oh, we're doing all these things together as a family, while also, you know, pushing away family, friends, and, you know, putting a kibosh on the other person, whether it's a female or a male's, you know, personal goals. And so I saw that this story is by Tananarive, and it's cold, and it's cold on purpose, like I said, because of the character David and his methodical way of killing everybody around her, being emotionally unavailable, and that being something that necessarily you would have to do as an immortal being. So I'm contrasting this to the Good House because, like I said, I want to explain that I'm not just saying that the Good House is reminds me so much of a Stephen King movie, but black, because Stephen King stuff is colder than the Good House stuff. Tananarive herself also has written a book that is cold, but this book just reminded me so much of a Stephen King book, but definitely colored brown and dark and rich and soulful and warm, and a horror mystery thriller gothic book that can still be warm was just such an interesting book to read, and I felt the best way to talk about it was in comparison to Stephen King. The book's description for The Good House by Tananarive, it says, working to rebuild her law practice after her son commits suicide, Angela Toussaint journeys to the family home where the suicide took place, hoping for answers, and discovers an invisible evil force that is driving locals to acts of violence. So there's all kinds of people in the town. Like, it's a really rich depiction of a town, like a fully realized town. And so I think it's interesting when both Stephen King and Tananarive get the balance right. Some books seem too crowded. Some books seems like there's not enough people in times where, so I read a book called No Exit, or When I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Those books were spare and claustrophobic and only had a few people on purpose, and it made sense. And then you read other books that need it, that I just finished reading a really simple, cozy mystery set, and there needed to be more people in this town. Cozy mysteries by definition, to me, have, you know, certain recipes like a romance. There needs to be, you know, what, depending on what type it is, it's, you know, if it's friends to lovers or, you know, enemies to lovers or whatever. And then there needs to be the third act conflict and then the happy ending. That's what a romance is. And so there needs to be certain things, in my opinion. I don't know if it's the same industry-wide standard for cozy mysteries, but there needs to be a chocolate shop, a town, there needs to be a murder, or, you know, there needs to be wacky people in the town, there needs to be tea and coffee and all that kind of stuff. So, and the series that I just read did not have all of that. It seemed too insular, it seemed too empty, and it took away from the enjoyment of the book. So the town that the Good House is in Sacagawea in the Pacific Northwest. It is deeded to Grandma Marie, Angela Toussaint's grandmother, and it's called the Good House. It started off being called the Good House because the doctor who lived there was Dr. Good. His business was failing. He took up with Grandma Marie, and the townspeople assumed she was a maid, but she actually was a nurse. She was actually a trained nurse, but she was also a healer from New Orleans. So she brought that with her. And his business in the town dried up. He then began to do mail order types of magical tinctures and things like that Grandma Marie cooked up, and they eventually became lovers and business partners. And he, on his, you know, in his will, deeded her the home. When he died, the white people of the town obviously couldn't think beyond, you know, they thought, why would he deed this big beautiful house to a black woman, not at all thinking that she could be the reason for his success, and the fact that he was able to keep the home and that they were lovers and partners, not just, she just wasn't his maid. So there was lots of terror. She was terrorized, and she ended up doing voodoo and with bad intent, and didn't do the rites, R-I-T-E, to cleanse herself from the stain of doing magic with bad intent. And it allowed the demon Baka to remain in that house. And so then Angela Toussaint, who we follow the majority of this book, she is, you know, haunted by the bad things in that house. You know, seeing her mother dead at the table from suicide, she runs away, and then when she comes back, her son commits suicide. Her husband, her ex-husband, who she came back to the house to try to rebuild a relationship with her son, he ends up killing himself. Her husband ends up going off the rails. Her neighbor ends up going off the rail through flashbacks, reading Grandma Marie's books, through POV changes of Tariq, who is Corey's father and Angela Toussaint's ex-husband. Through we get to see what the demon is doing. The Baka is the demon that's house to ground the towns, rides certain people that are susceptible to him, that are not protected. And I don't know if this was, I mean, I just was able to see a lot of ghost hauntings, demons as something else. I don't know if I'm really open to that because of the idea of the Haunting of Hill House, how they dealt with hauntings and ghosts as addictions, trauma, secrets. And these demons seem to be the same. They seem to be represented the same way in this book. I think Stephen King means for it to be the reason for racism, neglect, sexual abuse, bad things that are happening in the town that he is terrorizing every 27 years. But I think in The Good House, these demons are representative of the demons that we deal with. Tariq has a addiction problem that he fights with, and he has hold over it for a very long time, and then he slips back into it when the demon Baka starts to ride him. His natural propensity for anger and abuse comes out when he finally gives over to the demon Baka. There's secrets and mental illness that is not properly dealt with or talked about that the demon is able to take advantage of and wreak havoc in this family and in this town. Through supernatural means, we're able to investigate how women handle things and how culture and mysteries and magic and recipes and the center of family and life is passed down through women. We also are able to investigate race and how the town dealt with the one Black woman and eventually Native American man that Grandma Marie marries and brings into the Good House, and how that anger ends up poisoning Grandma Marie. You see it in Stephen King's books. Like, there's no deeper investigation as to the racism, the historicity of the racism. It's just, oh, this guy's a bad guy. Oh, this guy's racist because it did it. No, there's a historicity behind racism and why people don't have things, and why is Tariq so angry? Why is he so bitter? And it's been touched on through the book. It's woven through the book without you being banged over the head by it. Race is ever present in the story, just as race is ever present in America, but it's not blatant, harsh, gross, inward, and then that person is pushed out of the way because, oh, we showed that person is evil just because he said the N-word. No, racism is much more subtle, and it can be gross and flagrant like that, but it's also quite subtle, and it's dealt with that subtlety and that quietness and that constant being there is in this book. In Stephen King's books, oh, let's just bring somebody in and make them say the N-word a bunch of times, and that's how we show that they're evil. No, there's evil people who don't say the N-word. There's racist people who don't say the N-word. And in this book, all of that, the fullness of the Black experience, the fullness of history and mystery and magic and all of that stuff can be experienced and also have a Gothic horror story with all these different people being pulled into it, and demons and God, a Gothic house, and 3 generations of magic. And so that's what I mean. I hope I explained that, the difference between a Stephen King book that tries to explain the nature of evil or the existence of evil, where it's still outside of humanity. And Tananarive, in her book, does use a symbol of evil. It is very much so inside of humanity, and it's very much so these humans are specifically susceptible to it because of things that they already have on the inside of them. And then at the same time, Black people, like I said, aren't brought into the book to be used as something to be abused. Someone just says N-word to them or murders them because of a racial reason, and then they're thrown away. Again, obviously, Black people are the center of this book. And then the beauty of Blackness So there is a love story, and while there is a breaking down of a marriage between Tariq and Angela, she is falling in love with, oh, I think his name is Miles. Oh, I didn't write down his name. I believe the other guy is Miles, and he was her childhood love, and listening to him being described as beautiful, and the different types of brown being described as beautiful. I think that's that fudgy, chocolatey middle warmth. It was really sweet, the rekindling of their love story. And then the friendship between Naomi and Angela rang true, and it sounded like a Black girlfriend's story. The relationship between Grandma Marie and Angela and Corey was authentic to the multi-generational relationships in Black families, and how important it is and how close it is. Also, I liked the joy in the midst of multiple times there were parties in the house, and there was the difference between the, you know, because it's a multicultural neighborhood, and so it was cute little nods to white people watching the Black people dance, and the, you know, the rhythm issues, and the jazz, and different types of music and dancing and food, and all of that just made for such a rich backdrop to this scary, spooky story. I really enjoyed it, and that's what I meant in whatever video that I posted, where I said that The Good House reminded me of Stephen King, but covered in chocolate and warm caramel and warm fudge. And so I just wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive into what that meant, and to encourage you to read the book and let me know what you thought about The Good House. It's also quite timeless. I have no idea where I got the idea that this was a brand new book. I thought it came out this year. It came out in 2003. And so I said that, and I even like voted for it in the 2020 Shaded Choice Awards thing. So that's a goof on me. But let me know what your thoughts were about the book, if you've read it. Let me know if you are encouraged to read it, and let's have a conversation down in the conversation box. And thank you for watching this video, and I will see you the next time I put out one.